All right, good afternoon. Good afternoon and welcome to the June 12th, 2018 convening of the Board of the Baltimore Board of Municipal and Zoning Appeals. A few house rules before we get underway. First, if you have a cell phone, a pager, anything that makes any kind of audible electronic sound, plays a ringtone, a chime, beeps, etc., we ask that at a minimum you please turn those devices to a vibrate only, if not off position. Similarly, to the extent that you need to have a conversation with someone, we ask that you please take those conversations out the double doors to your rear. And the reason for those rules is pretty simple and straightforward. First, you'll note that there are a number of microphones which are arrayed around us up here. Those microphones are all very sensitive, not only for the purpose of amplification, but also for the purpose of recording these proceedings. And cell phones, pagers, conversations, general noise, etc., interferes with not just the conduct of these proceedings, but also the recording of these proceedings as well. Similarly, those of you who were forward of the wall above you, if you turn around, you can see that there are 1, 2, 3 video cameras which are mounted on the wall back there behind you. And there are 1, 2 video cameras which are mounted on the wall up here behind us. Those video cameras are live, and they are streaming these proceedings as we speak, or as I speak. On the website for the city's cable access network, as well as recording these proceedings for subsequent broadcast on said cable access network. It comes on after Wayne's World if you're interested. And also for all posterity on the city's YouTube channel. So cell phones, pagers, conversations, and the like also interfere and interrupt that process as well. We will be voting at the end of the day, and you're certainly more than welcome to hang around and enjoy a civics lesson if you so choose, but if you've got other things to do on this otherwise splendid mid-June afternoon, that's certainly quite understandable. And if you take out pen and paper, I can give you the number for the zoning board office, and you can call in the morning and find out how we ruled on your case. I'll read this number off a couple of times to give you some time to get your paper out. The number for the zoning board office is 410-396-4301. That number again is 410-396-4301. You will, however, need to wait until you receive the formal written notice of the outcome of your case, which should be forthcoming in about 3 to 4 weeks before you are able to get your permits and begin your work. And we certainly ask that you please not build in the city of Baltimore without first obtaining all of your proper permits. If you haven't already done so, if you're here in opposition to any case today, we ask that you please sign in on our sign-in sheet, being held up right now by Mr. French. Sign-in sheet allows us not only generally to know which cases have opposition, but also allows us to know who needs to receive those aforementioned written notices I was just talking about. Similarly, we do have some postponements on our docket today, as well as at least one case which is being withdrawn, so these cases will not be heard today. So we need to know who you are and how to contact you to let you know when the postponed cases will be going forward, so that you will be able to have that information and be able to appear for that rescheduled hearing. If you are the appellant, when the cases are called, we ask that you please come forward, and you'll stand to our left or your right. The opposition, if any, will stand to our right or your left. Once everyone is up here, we'll get you all sworn in. And then we'll begin with the appellant, who'll be given the opportunity to present their side of things, to let the board know what is being proposed, what the issues are in their appeal, generally present whatever evidence in the way of testimony, documents, etc., that they would like the board to consider in support of their position. They'll also respond to any questions which the board may have. Once the appellant is concluded, we'll then turn to the opposition, if any, who will be given the opportunity to do the same thing, that is, present their side of things, their evidence, documents, witnesses, etc., in support of their position. And finally, we will turn back to the appellant, who will be given the opportunity to respond to any points brought up by the opposition, if any, and to offer a closing statement. We won't be going back and forth and necessarily delaying things into the later afternoon longer than is necessary. We will be calling the cases in the order in which they generally appear on the docket after we first dispense with some preliminary matters. First, as I mentioned, we do have a number of cases which are being postponed. These are cases which will not be heard today, but will be heard at a later date to be reset by the parties. First case we have is 2017-198, 4123 through 4125 Reisterstown Road. Muhammad Iqbal.
Come forward.
Yes, please. All right, sir.
Good afternoon.
Your name, please?
Douglas Kington. I'm the owner's representative for Mr. Muhammad Iqbal.
Okay. And, sir, we understand that you're requesting a postponement in this case?
Yes.
Okay. Anyone? I don't think we had anyone sign in on the case, but all right. 2017-198, 4123 through 4125 Reisterstown Road is postponed. Once you're ready to go forward, just call into the office and they'll get you in on the next available date.
Great. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.
What's your name, sir? I just missed it.
Douglas Kington. And there's a letter I submitted that has all of my contact information on it.
That's Kaington.
Yes, I can give you a copy for you if you like. Okay.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Take care. Have a good day. All right. Next, we have a number of postponements, all in a group, 2018-46 through 2018-50. These are properties 2000 through 2008 McElderry Street. These cases are being postponed until August the 12th at 1 p.m. Those cases will not be heard today. 2018-85, 848 North Utah Street, 2018-116, 846 North Utah Street. Both of those cases have been postponed. They will be heard on July the 10th, 2018 at 1 p.m. 2018-125, 2000 through 2006, North Forest Park Avenues, 5201 through 5205, Muth Avenues, and 3 descriptive lots. Those cases have been postponed. There is not currently a date for those to be rescheduled. In 2018-154, 1807 Madison Avenue, that case has been withdrawn. And the last postponement we have another one, 2018-158, 2200 Huntington Avenue, that case has been postponed. And 2018-167, 2080 Rock Rose Avenue, that case has been postponed until July 24th, 2018 at 3 p.m. So if you're here on any of those cases, we ask that you please sign in on the signing sheet so we can notify you as to any developments in those cases, and also send you out a hearing notice for when those cases will be scheduled, but none of those cases will be heard today. Next, we have the cases which are on our consent agenda, and the consent agenda consists of cases where the zoning board staff has reviewed the files in these matters, and the board has determined that we have the ability to approve these cases on a consent basis upon the record, which is already in the file. I'm going to call the consent cases together as a group. So when we do, the first person will come up, they'll stand in line at this microphone right there. Everyone else will line up down the dais as their cases are called. Once everyone is up here, we will then get you all sworn in as a group, and then we'll call each case in turn and give them the opportunity at that time to offer any information that you would like to have added to the record at that time. 2018-146, 1428 Battery Avenue, Ray Rahuba. Calling again, 2018-146, 1428 Battery Avenue, Ray Rahuba. Okay. Next on the consent agenda is 2018-149, 3119 Barclay Street, Adrian Ackerman.
Hello.
Afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
And then we'll have 2018-162, 3116 Elliott Street, Adam Carballo. 2018-164, 2826 Hudson Street, Idan Samarat. And last, we have 2018-166, 2125 Harford Road, Robert Smith. right, gentlemen, if you all raise your right hands and be sworn, please.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony that you're about to give in this hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
I do.
All right, calling the first case on the consent agenda, which is 2018-149, 3119 Barclay Street, Adrian Ackerman.
Yes, sir. I'm Adrian Ackerman.
Afternoon, sir. We have this as an application to raise and construct a new two-story rear addition at this location. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right. Mr. French, anything on behalf of the planning board?
Martin French for the Baltimore City Planning Department. The Planning Department has no comment on this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ackerman, anything further you would like to have added to the record at this time?
No, thank you, sir.
Okay. Zoning board staff, having previously reviewed your application, we have determined that there is sufficient information to approve the appeal. Good luck to you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Have a good day.
Next, 2018-162, 3116 Elliott Street, Adam Carballo.
Hello?
Afternoon, Mr. Carballo. We have this as an application to construct a three-story rear addition and rooftop deck at this location. Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right. Mr. French, anything on behalf of the planning department?
Planning Department has no comment on this application. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Carballo, anything further you would like to have added to the record at this time?
No, sir.
All right. Zoning board staff, having previously reviewed the application, we have determined that there is sufficient information to approve the appeal.
Thank you.
Good luck. Next, 2018-164, 2826 Hudson Street, Edon Summerett. Afternoon, sir. We have this as an application to construct a two-story rear addition and rooftop deck at this location. Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right. Mr. French, anything for the planning department at this location?
Planning Department has no comment on this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Summerett, anything further you'd like to have added to the record in your case?
No, sir.
All right. Zoning board staff, having previously reviewed your application, we have determined that there is sufficient information to approve the appeal.
Thank you.
Good luck. Next, 2018-166, 2125 Harford Road, Robert Smith.
Yes, sir.
Afternoon, Mr. Smith. I take it you are Mr. Smith?
Yes, sir.
All right. Sir, we have this as an application to erect a 7-foot high rear fence at this location. Is that correct?
Yes.
Mr. French, anything from the planning department with respect to this appeal?
Yes, thank you. Planning Department reviewed the application, noted that this property is located in the East Baltimore Midway Urban Renewal Area. The Urban Renewal Plan does have specific standards concerning things such as fencing. The department therefore recommends that approval, if granted, be subject to the condition that all approved fencing is constructed in accordance with the requirements of the East Baltimore Midway Urban Renewal Plan. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Smith, is that condition stated by the planning department acceptable to you?
Yes.
All right. And anything further you would like to have added to the record in your case?
No, sir.
Zoning board staff, having previously reviewed your application, we have determined that there is sufficient information to approve your appeal.
Thank you, sir.
Good luck to you. Have a good day.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right, next we're going to deal with the remainder of our agenda, which will include cases where opposition is signed in. And frequently we found that opposition is a result of either a lack of communication or miscommunication among the parties. And it can be useful to offer the parties an opportunity to have a dialogue between themselves to see if they can reach some sort of accommodation resolving whatever dispute they may have. Now, you're certainly not obliged to take the opportunity to speak with one another, but certainly if there are two sides who are engaged in a dispute and they come forward and ask the board to resolve their dispute, one of those two sides will walk away disappointed with the result. So this is your opportunity to avoid that unhappy fate. While you don't have to speak with one another, we certainly do encourage and appreciate it when you do. First case where we have opposition, which is signed in, I'm just going to call these cases off. You can just stand up where you are. We'll ask if there's been any dialogue and whether or not the parties would like to either have a dialogue now or continue their dialogue. If so, you can just step out and see if you can get something accomplished. If not, just come back in and we'll call you each in turn. First case where opposition is signed in is 2018-117, 4027 Old York Road, Kevin Ricks. Okay. Who else is signed in that case? Anyone? No? No? Okay. Have a seat. 2018-124, 201 through 203 Wilson Streets, Ben Frederick. Okay, all right. And who else is signed in that case? Oh, okay, great. All right, continue their dialogue. They don't need to come back in. I was gonna say, if you folks are already speaking, just continue to speak. We're not calling the case right now. We're just seeing if you want to talk. Since you're already talking, continue then. 2018-133, 1214 Utah Place, Nate Prettle. All right, who signed in that case? Okay. All right. Any prospect of a resolution? All right, doesn't hurt to speak. What else do we have? All right, I think that's the last one where we have opposition. Okay, calling the first case, this will be 2018-117, 4027 Old York Road, Kevin Ricks. Afternoon, sir. You're Mr. Ricks?
Yes, sir.
All right. Mr. Ricks, we have this as an application to use the first floor as a convenience store. Is
Yes.
that correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. Sir, would you please raise your right hand to be sworn?
Do you swear or affirm the testimony that you're about to give in this hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yep.
All right. Do we have any staff reports?
Yes. Planning Department has reviewed this application and has no objection to it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Mr. Ricks, why don't you tell us a bit about what you're planning at this location?
Oh, okay. I grew up around the neighborhood of Old York and Cater. I'm naming the store Mrs. Muggs Mini Mart because of my grandmother who
What
grew
was
up
that
around
name
there.
again, sir?
Mrs. Muggs Mini Mart
Okay.
is dedicated to my grandmother. When I was younger, I knew that I was eventually when I get older, I wanted to own something around there for my family, of course, that grew up around there. And when that opportunity presented itself, I just got the store, and I want to give back to my community.
Okay. Is there anything there currently? Like, is there like a business operating there? or-
Oh, no.
Okay.
It was a salon at one point in time, but I own the property now, so that's what I'm trying to actually get to change it.
Gotcha. How long have you owned the property, sir?
For a year and I think about a year and 3 months, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. And do you know what was, I guess you said that the salon was there
Yes.
previously. Do you know, are you familiar with the prior businesses that have been in that space before?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, what are some of those that have, what has it been over the years?
I just know two. I know it was a shoe store at one first, and then it became the salon. Those
Okay.
are the two, yeah.
Do you recall how long ago it was the shoe store?
This had to have been at least about 3 years, maybe. 3 years ago.
Okay. So it was the shoe store and then it became the salon?
Yeah, then it became the salon.
Trying to see if there's any.
And Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
there was a prior appeal in 1947 to construct additions to the property for a store and dwelling unit.
I did see that reflected.
Gives a little bit of history there.
Okay.
Do you have any photos of the front of the building at all, or?
I not on paper. I have one in my phone, but not on paper. It's just the sign. That's the only thing that got changed.
Okay, it looks like it's kind of a flat front building, is that?
Yep.
I can't tell if it's a large display window that's there? or-
Yeah, it's two display windows. It's one on the left and one on the right.
Okay, and then with the central doorway.
Central doorway. Yeah, all glass.
All right. Any further questions? All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right, next we're gonna go to 2018-129, 3233 East Fayette Street, Clifton Addison.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon, sir. We have this as an application to construct a one-story, four-bay auto garage for repair, maintenance, and service of company vehicles with offices at this location. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
All right, sir, would you please raise your right hand to be sworn?
Do you swear or affirm the testimony that you're about to give in this hearing will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Do we have staff reports?
Yes, Planning Department has reviewed this application, noted that there are basically two parts in this application. One is for use as offices, two offices. This use would be permissible under the C1 zoning district the property is located in. However, the one-story garage, for purposes of motor vehicle service or repair, is a use that is not permitted in the C1 zoning district. And therefore, in order to establish the proposed use, the applicant would need to show that this is in fact a continuation of a non-conforming use of the property. The department reviewed records available to it and noted that this property did have at one time an approval for an auto repair garage, which was approved by this board by appeal number 32-09. But there was, pardon me, no actual construction or reconstruction of the property. And in the determination of the department, there's been over 4 years from that time when this property has not been used for that purpose, and therefore there is no current non-conforming use of the property. The department therefore recommends disapproval of the application because the proposed use is prohibited in the C1 zoning district where the property is located, and the board is not authorized to approve creation of a new non-conforming use of this property. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Addison, I think that the Planning Department has pretty much laid your task in front of you.
Yes.
What say you in response?
The property is owned by Metro Development, which has a company that operates out of that location called Control Tech, HVAC company. They've owned that particular property. As a matter of fact, they own 3 of those properties at that location. Both of the properties, 2 of the properties are located on the Clinton side of the street. That is where their main office is. And the Fayette Street partial is owned by Metro Development, as I said, which is Control Tech. What they're trying to do is, because they do have vehicles that they maintain, they have a cluster of vehicles, a fleet of vehicles, they need an area where they can do maintenance, small maintenance. They have that lot. That lot has always been deemed for some sort of auto mechanics or repair. As a matter of fact, it goes back to 1995, where it was some type of use of auto repair, something of that nature. So from 1995, that use basically began. In 03, it was still used for the premises for auto accessory and repair and installation. They came back again in 04. That's when they applied. They had some structural damages to that particular building. They had to demo it. That left a lot vacant. Okay? They came back again in 09, and that's when they pursued the fact that they wanted to put the garage there and continue with some type of automotive service for their vehicles. They did get approved by this board. Financial issues came into play. They couldn't go on with it. The lot has been vacant since then. Okay, they reapplied, but the change, at that time, it was B22, something of that nature. So it was allowed. Since the change came to C1, that's where the issue comes in as far as the conforming use. But the company has been in operation in that location for close to 20 years. As I said, they do have a fleet of vehicles. They would like to start doing some type of service in that location, which that partial, they wanted to develop it into a 4-bay. Originally, when the structure was there, it was a 1-bay unit. That's when they had the structural damage. They had to tear it down. We seem like we're in a dilemma because we're dealing with the C1 issue. This is basically a business district. Basically, as you can see, guys, and I want to let the council see this site plan. This whole area is basically garages. That's what they're using it for. It's been garages for God knows how long. And it's owned by Metro Development. And what they're trying to do is
Pass
have,
it up?
yes, sir.
That way you can use the microphone.
Yes, sir. As you can see, those lots, those surrounding lots, and everyone, zoning should know it, planning should know it, it's always been deemed for garage. That particular lot, because it's been vacant, they would like to try to get that into the same mold for their company to service their vehicles. C1 is the main issue. As I said again, B22, we wouldn't be standing here at all. So what we're trying to do is, we're trying to convince the board that it is definitely needed for that company to function, because you got a fleet of vehicles, you got to fix your vehicle. We have a space there. The problem was, when the Jonings change came into play, that nullified it. We're trying to get this thing settled here and now.
Okay.
We have to postpone this, we will, to dig up some more history, things of that nature, but I think we can kind of come to a medium on this, of what we're trying to do and how important it is for the company to have it.
All right. Looking at what you've got here, you said that
Yeah, they got-
the lot that we're looking at is this rectangular one, right? All right, but the owner owns all three of these lots.
Not only that, they own that whole area.
Okay, so they own all of it, right? But these lots have not been consolidated, correct?
No,
Okay,
no,
they're,
they're separate parcels.
okay, that might be possibly the first place where you want to start. But you've said that that despite this lot here, that is Lot 3A being vacant, operations of the property owner have been going on this
Surrounding.
whole time on these other contiguous
Yes,
parcels.
they've had automotive, and I think they are leasing the space to other automotive repair companies.
Okay. So, backing up, the reason why I asked about the consolidation issue is that the zoning approval, of course, goes along with the particular lot. So, while you're looking to do an automotive repair use that would really be accessory to the other operations that are going on, you can't be accessory to operations on another parcel.
So if they consolidate it.
So if all of these were consolidated lots, that might be a different situation. But as of right now, what you testified to is that there's been no automotive use that's been going on this property.
I know that they've leased
not
the
since
space as
2009.
far as, they've leased that space for automotive dealerships, something of that nature. I don't know if they've gone through the situation of getting it.
Well,
going through
the
zoning,
issue that we've got is that, there was a last authorized use for tire sales and service with a UNO issued in 2005. And there was a structure that was there.
Right.
Where that business was conducted, and that structure was raised in 2009.
Right.
And there's been no reconstruction of the structure, no automotive-related use, at least not a permitted one, since the property has been demolished, or the structure was demolished. So, on that record, you can't say that there's a continuation of a non-conforming use, because although there was a non-conforming use there before, it's been discontinued in further evidence by removal of the structure that was there. So that would be a problem. But the one thing that I would suggest is that you might want to look into the possibility of consolidating lots and try to see if you can have did you want to make this part of the record?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
I don't know if they have it, but
Now, you would have to work with the planning department on that, and Mr. French, do you have any input as far as how that process might go?
Well, consolidation actually is an owner's right. Essentially, in a situation like this, it's a matter of filing an application with the city for approval to consolidate. The finance department reviews it. If it's approved by the finance department, then the property owner is clear to basically record deeds that show the consolidation of the property from multiple to a single ownership of a single property.
And I think that that's probably the way you want to go with
that's
this.
course of action.
That being said, do you want to postpone your
Yes.
case at this point? Okay. All right. So 2018-129, 3233 East Fayette Street is postponed. Once you look into that and sort of address the other issues, then, you may be able to go forward you'll probably be in a different posture at that point, but at least at this point, having postponed, you can withdraw this case if you so choose, and then, resubmit a different one, and you may not even have to, but anyways, that's up to you.
Thank you, Mr. Washington.
Okay, take care, sir.
Thank you.
2018-130, 1321 Western Avenue, Nate Prettle. Mr. Prettle.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon, sir. We have this as an application to replace an existing billboard with a new billboard with one LED face, the dimensions to remain the same. Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right. Would you please raise your right hand to be sworn, sir?
Sure. I'll mention that I'm going to be requesting a postponement on this, so I don't know
Okay.
if it's still necessary.
No, it's not. Okay, 2018-130, 1321 Western Avenue is postponed. All right? You've got a couple others, so have a seat.
I was actually going to request postponement of the next one, and I think it's next on the docket.
Oh, 2000, okay. Calling the case of 2018-133, 1214 Utah Place, also Nate Prettle. Mr. Duff?
Let them stand on the side of the car.
Okay, gentlemen, Mr. Prettle stated the applicant desires a postponement in this case. Is it correct, Mr. Prettle?
That's correct. We're relatively confident that we can have an agreement within the next 2 weeks. We'd like to be on the June 26th docket. I know you have a busy docket. That's with the hopes that we'll have an agreement with the Bolton Hill Neighborhood Association by that time. It was more of a process issue than a substance, even though there were a few substantive issues that we plan on working out prior to that date.
Okay, and Mr. Duff, you're here in opposition to the case, is that correct?
Yes, and I agree with what Mr. Prettle just said.
Okay, Mr. Baumgartner and the 26th. Okay, all right, thank you all.
Thank you very much.
All right, 2018-133, 1214 Utah Place is postponed. 2018-141, 219 South Broadway, Harry Coakley. Good afternoon, sir. You're Mr. Coakley?
Yes.
Okay. And ma'am, you are?
I'm co-owner Shamia Harcum.
Say that name again?
Shamia Harcum.
Okay. Can you spell that for us?
Shamia.
Okay. And Ms. Harkin, if you could bend one of those microphones down for Mr. Coakley. There you go. All right. Mr. Coakley, we have this as an application to use a portion of the first floor at this location as a carry-out shop. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. Gentleman and lady, if you would please raise your right hand to be sworn.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony that you're about to give in this hearing will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
Correct, yes.
All right. Do we have staff reports?
Yes, Planning Department has reviewed this application, noted that this property is within the Fells Point Historic District, which is a locally designated historic district in which all exterior changes to properties, including any additions, demolitions, alterations, and signage, are subject to review by the Commission for Historical and Architectural Preservation. The department recommends that approval of the application be subject to the condition that all exterior changes, including additions, demolitions, and alterations, are completed in accordance with an authorization to proceed issued by the Commission for Historical and Architectural Preservation. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Mr. Coakley, sorry, is that condition stated by the Planning Department acceptable to you?
Yes.
All right. And sir, why don't you tell us a bit about what you're planning in this location?
I have a restaurant called A Bite of Paradise, and it's basically going to be a bakery carry-out and catering business.
Mhm.
We leased the space in February, and it was already an existing restaurant, so we haven't had to make any changes to the space. I'm pretty sure it was San Miguel's restaurant for about, the landlord told us about 13 years before we leased it, and he told us that there was a gift shop next door that might have been, it was some confusion about 219 being a gift shop, but it was actually an existing restaurant. So we haven't done any build-out or changes.
Okay.
What was the name of the restaurant again?
San Miguel's, I believe.
Thank you.
So there's going to be carry-out and catering?
Yes, bakery,
And bakery.
catering, and, so we're gonna have cakes and catering for like weddings and stuff like that, but we're also gonna have our food to be available to like get dinners taken out and things like that.
Okay. Just looking over your floor plans here. All right, and I guess it looks like the structure, actually, no. I was gonna say, it looks like the structure might take up the whole lot, but it doesn't. It looks like there's a space in the back, but there's no alley access or anything like that to it.
No.
All right. Okay, any questions? All right, anything further? All right, thank you both.
Thank you.
Take care, everything. Good luck. 2018-148, 1611 Eastern Avenue, Danielle Schiller. Mr. Williams.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon, sir. We have this as an application to use the first floor at this location as a healthcare clinic. Is that correct?
Correct.
If all those intending to give testimony in this case come forward and raise their right hands to be sworn.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony that you're about to give in this hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
And do we have staff reports?
A letter of support in the file from the Douglas District Neighborhood Association.
Planning Department reviewed this application, noted that this property is in the Fells Point Historic District, a locally designated historic area. Therefore, any exterior changes, including additions, demolitions, alterations, and signage, are subject to review and approval by the Commission for Historical and Architectural Preservation. The department recommends approval of this application be subject to the condition that all exterior alterations and signage are completed or installed in accordance with an authorization to proceed issued by the Commission for Historical and Architectural Preservation. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Williams, are those conditions stated by the planning department acceptable to your client?
They are.
All right, and why don't you tell us what we're dealing with?
Sure. For the record, Justin Williams from the law firm Rosenberg Martin Greenberg, LLP. I'm joined by Dr. Danielle Schiller. She's the applicant. Her business partner is Michael Diamond. He's also here. David Nauman is the landlord. He's here. And also Michael Ryan, the president of the Douglas District Neighborhood Association. Just want to walk you through a few items. I gave you a folder with exhibits talking about our request today. This is an application for conditional use approval to use the ground floor of the property as a healthcare clinic. The property is located in Fells Point, and it was previously zoned B22, which would have allowed the use by right, but now in the C1 zoning district, we need conditional use approval. To walk you through some of the exhibits I've given you, the property is located on the south side of Eastern Avenue, between South Bond Street and South Broadway Street in the Douglas District, which is named for the abolitionist Frederick Douglass. I have the aerial photo for you to see this location in the northern part of Fells Point. The property is in the same block as the My Home Furniture Store at 1605 Eastern Avenue. Michael Ryan is here also. He's the president of the Douglas District Neighborhood Association and the co-owner of the My Home store. He's been instrumental in redeveloping this block and has been a supporter of this project as well. I have in the packet of exhibits street view photos showing the before and after, and it's part of the redevelopment and rebirth that Mr. Ryan has been a part of on this location. The subject property has a history of ground level commercial use, but is currently vacant. The landlord is David Newman, and he acquired the property in late 2004 and lives above the ground level commercial space. A little bit about the healthcare clinic that's proposed. Dr. Schiller has entered into a lease with the landlord to lease the ground floor of the property to open a healthcare clinic. I've included a copy of the site plan and floor plan for your review and the exhibits. Dr. Schiller is a board-certified gynecologist and osteopath and was the chief of gynecology at Good Samaritan Hospital and then was the founding director of Women's Wellness Center at Northwest Hospital. She currently performs surgery at both Northwest and Sinai hospitals. As an osteopath, she takes a holistic and whole-body approach to healthcare. And so Dr. Schiller proposed to take this approach to healthcare and open a medical clinic that will be designed to assist Maryland patients in obtaining practitioner recommendations for medical cannabis. And in compliance with the ethical standards of practice and the regulations set by the Maryland Medical Cannabis Commission, the clinic will assist patients who may have various ailments such as chronic pain, seizures, anxiety, and many more to have a novel treatment that wasn't available to them in the past. I have more background on the medical cannabis regulations if that's the stuff you want to hear about or go into. The basic overview is that this has been a 4-year process to establish the medical cannabis industry in Maryland. There are now 50 dispensaries licensed across the state. In addition to the eager patients who have a novel treatment available to them, a lot of policymakers are excited about the opioid alternative available to patients now. And for example, as recently as October 2017, it was calculated that over 140 Americans die each day from opioid overdose. But is one of the exhibits in your file, an AMA study showing that on average, when a state medical cannabis law is passed, the state rate of deaths drop by 25% from opioid overdoses. Additionally, medical cannabis acts as an alternative to opioid treatment and also as a treatment for opioid addiction. And there's a study also in the file of exhibits that shows that a survey of medical cannabis patients in Michigan reported a 64% decrease in opioid use after being introduced to the alternative of medical cannabis.
So what will be the actual operations at this location?
Right. So Dr. Schiller and her staff will treat patients like a normal healthcare clinic. You'll see in the floor plan there's 2 exam rooms. Their operating hours will be from 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. There's requirements under the state regulations for medical cannabis to establish a bona fide provider-patient relationship. So there won't be a sham storefront you might see in other states or other examples of other instances. They have to maintain and create patient records and in accord with medically accepted standards, and the physician must monitor and do follow-up in accord with their state board regulations. The clinic represents $300,000 of privately funded investment, anticipates creating 5 to 6 full and part-time jobs.
Okay, so it's basically going to be a doctor's office.
Yes, a wellness center that will treat, and that will be designed to refer patients for medical cannabis. A lot of the regulations and doctors involved in healthcare practices are prohibited from recommending or prescribing medical cannabis.
Okay. And when I go to my doctor's office, I get a prescription for whatever. I go and I get that filled somewhere else, correct?
Correct, and that's the same practice here. Under the Medical Cannabis Commission regulations, they can't offer even samples of cannabis. They have to go to a dispensary.
All right. Okay, any questions?
No, I'm good.
Since you're here, I want to testify in support of Mr. If I can go, Mr. Wright. Sorry.
My name is Michael Wright. Actually, David Nauman and I are the only residents that actually live on that block, and I'm a board member of the Douglas District Neighborhood Association. I also own the property east of the proposed clinic and the other two buildings that are one away on the south side or the west side of that. And yeah, we had the doctor into our neighborhood association. There were no objections, and we're actually thrilled to have them be a part of the neighborhood.
How you doing? David Nauman. David what? Nauman. It's N as in Nancy, A-U-M-A-N-N. I bought that property back around 2004. I moved in it about 10 years ago. I live in the upper 3 floors of that building. When I first opened it, it was a furniture store. On the first level, we did full tax credits on the front and got a grant for the front of it. So the front used to be boarded up since the 50s, and now it's very nice on the front. So she's not making any changes to the front of the building. It's David.
So just to close, this use meets the test of Shelter Pritz. It's supported by the Planning Department and Neighborhood Association of activated vacant storefront. And we hope you approve the request.
All right, thank you. 2018-155, 5300 Moravia Road, Amrish Patel. Good afternoon, sir. You're Mr. Patel?
Good afternoon, yes.
All right, sir, we have this as an application to construct a new drive-through restaurant at this location. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right. Would you please raise your right hand to be sworn?
You swear or affirm the testimony that you're about to give in this hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
No staff reports.
Yes, Planning Department has met with this applicant back in August of 2017 to review a concept plan for redevelopment of this property. The existing building on the property is to be demolished and replaced with a new structure. The key issue that was not resolved at that time was approval by the city's Department of Transportation of a proposed 35-foot wide driveway entrance that would give access to the property. This entrance would be basically replacing 2 other existing driveway entrances that would be closed. The department therefore recommends approval of the application subject to the condition that all improvements to the property, including street access, surfacing, and landscaping, are completed in accordance with the site and development plans approved by the Department of Transportation and the Department of Planning. Thank you.
Thank you. Sir, are those conditions stated by the Planning Department acceptable to you?
Yes.
All right. Why don't you talk to us about what is being planned here, and if also you could address the access issues described by Mr. French as well.
Well, it was previously was a gas station, and we removed all the tanks and everything has been removed and environmentally safe. And right now it's abundant property. There's nothing going on there, so we try to develop a chicken place over there. And basically it's going to be most of them it's drive-through. So, and there's a next door. There's already the same chicken place with other
Popeyes.
Popeyes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right. And can you walk us through how traffic is going to be coming onto the site and getting off of the site?
It's going to go through the Moravia Road. We're going to close from 2 entrances to 1 entrance, so there's not going to be any bottleneck of the traffic. So it's coming through the Moravia, and there's a whole parking lot over there, so it can exit from there. So it doesn't affect the traffic pattern of the whole area.
Okay. So people are going to be entering from Moravia
right,
to loop around the drive-through, and then they come across here to exit?
Right, yeah.
All right, so they come in here.
So it doesn't congest the specific entrance. Right
Gotcha.
now you have two entrances, so right now it's more hazardous than what we try to do with the one entrance.
All right. And who owns this lot next door?
The thing is, we have the developer here. Which one? Cosmo Company.
Okay. And my question is, they giving you permission to cut across their lot?
Yeah.
And the other issue that we've got here is that you've got a building height issue. Where you're trying to find it here. The minimum building height is 20 feet, yet your building will be less than that.
Yes, sir.
I'm guessing that the facade of the building and the structure is
It's pre-manufactured, it's from Checkers, you know.
Okay,
they have
so it's a
the-
prefab.
Yeah, prefab building. Basically, the foundation plan, and then on that, the whole thing sits on the prefab building.
Okay.
Martin, what planning have to say about the minimum height?
We didn't have any objection to the height being less than 20 feet in this situation. This is a property that's going to be somewhat removed from the street front. It's set back well from the street front, so it's not going to be that obvious that it's less than 20 feet from Moravia Road.
Thank you.
All right. Any questions?
No, good.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. 2018-161, 3531 Gulf Street, Shannon Cassidy. Afternoon, ma'am.
Hi,
You're Ms. Cassidy?
I am.
Okay, Ms. Cassidy, we have this as an application to continue to use the first floor as a tavern and add live entertainment. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right. Ma'am, would you please raise your right hand to be sworn?
Mhm.
Swear or affirm the testimony that you're about to give in this hearing will be the truth, the whole truth.
I do.
Do we have staff reports?
Planning Department has reviewed this application. It only has an informal comment and then a specific recommendation. The informal comment is that the application should provide greater specificity about the days on which the live entertainment would actually occur. The department recommends approval, subject to these conditions, which are the standard ones that the department recommends for this type of use. A copy of the use and occupancy permit for the premises must be kept on the premises and available for inspection by representatives of Baltimore City at all times. A copy of the written approval by the board of the live entertainment provided on the premises, including details of any restrictions or limitations on the live entertainment provided, must be kept on the premises and available for inspection by representatives of Baltimore City at all times. And a copy of all other permits and licenses required pursuant to the written approval of the board must be kept on the premises and available for inspection by representatives of Baltimore City at all times. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Cassidy, those conditions stated by the planning department acceptable to you?
They are. So I picked all 6 days that were open, and I only wanted to have music 2 days a week, since my neighbor, since they would, I don't want to drive my neighbor crazy.
Yeah.
But since they're asking us to choose, I went out in the hall and I called the community association and my neighbor and asked if we could go ahead and just go for all 6 days.
Okay.
So instead of just being 2 days, I'd like to just ask for all 6, and then we can pick from there.
Okay. Are you still only intending?
I'm only going to play music a couple days a week.
It's a week, that's
Yeah.
right. But
But I
just
don't
so
want to
that
have to say it's Saturday or
you
Friday.
want the flexibility there to
Yes.
sort of move that around.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Is it acoustic music?
It's acoustic music, yeah. I like my neighbor.
What would be the quiet day?
Well, so that's something I want to work out with, Kathy, so we'll work out what days, can be, that work for her. And sometimes there's special events that happen in the community, so I didn't want to say, oh, we'll never have something on Saturday, and then there's a festival or something, and we want to have live music.
But the establishment's open 7 days a week?
We're open 6 days a week. We're closed Sundays.
Okay. That was
Yeah, I'm sorry, I misunderstood. 6 day, 1 o'clock.
And what will be the hours of the live entertainment?
So probably usually 6 to 11, but I think I put 3 to 11 as possible playing time. We open at 3.
No, you got 6 to 11 here.
Okay.
Yeah.
I tried to be as respectful as possible.
Okay. Trying to think if we can narrow down. This issue as to the days of live entertainment. Are you primarily looking to do live entertainment on weekends? Are there any days during the week that you're looking at that?
I'm not 100% certain. There's no place in our area that there's any live music. So for the last, I've been there 12 years, and probably the last 8 years, people have been asking, why don't you get live entertainment? We have a lot of musicians that they'd want to do a hootenanny or just get together and, jam quietly in there. Or, we've got some Irish musicians that wouldn't mind doing something, so they've been asking for us to have it. I don't really have a full plan as to, other than how loud it can be and what hours the cutoffs would be. We haven't fully formulated what exactly we'd like to see happen. I do know that we also have food, we do art shows, we do a lot with the community. I would really like to limit it to a couple days a week, but I can't tell you exactly which days. I'd rather ask for 6 and have the flexibility of being able to say, oh, this week it's Saturday, but next week it's Friday.
Okay. All right. Okay.
The neighborhood association approves the...
They do, and I called to see if we needed to do an addendum for the letter that Brian would be willing to sign off on 6, and so would my neighbor Kathy. They both gave me letters to recommendation.
Do we have those in the file there?
You should.
I don't remember seeing any. Were those submitted?
They were
if you're aware?
submitted. I gave them 6 copies at the when I submitted my application. This should have been from the Southeast Highlandtown Community Association, as well as letters from Kathy Shapiro.
We do have one here. There's one. And on the back. The floor plan is the other one.
We do have a letter of support from the Highlandtown Community Association, and yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Did they say anything about hours or days?
I
Derek
believe they
Delay?
might.
Is this from Catherine? It's not specific.
Kathy's might not, but I did ask Brian specifically for 2. I said, I'm only just going to go ask for 2 days. So that's why I went out and called him and said, could you do an addendum if you need to? So I don't know if his specifically says 2 days or just says music.
Their letter says the Laughing Pine is located at 3531 Gulf Street. The HCA, the Highlandtown Community Association, understands that this proposed entertainment will be limited to live music with minimal amplification and karaoke. The hours for live entertainment will be limited to between 6 p.m. and 11 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and 6 p.m. to 12 midnight on Friday and Saturday evenings.
Oh, okay.
The owner and the establishment have proven to be good neighbors and an asset to the neighborhood for over 10 years. And the owner maintains a dialogue with the community association and neighboring residents.
Okay. All right. Okay. Any questions?
No, good.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Two 2018-165, 3200 Fate Avenue, Caroline Hecker.
Good afternoon, filling in for Caroline Hecker right now.
Afternoon, Mr. Williams. We've got this as an application to use the premises for 3 dwelling units, is that correct?
That's correct.
We've got no witnesses, so we can go on to staff reports.
One letter in the file, letter of approval, or letter of support from the Canton Community Association.
Planning Department has reviewed this application, and after some conversations with the applicant concerning some of the details, has no objection to the application. Thank you.
All right. Okay, Mr. Williams, why don't you tell us what we're looking at?
Sure. For the record, Justin Williams from the law firm Rosenberg Martin Greenberg, LLP, on behalf of the applicant who scheduling conflict occurred. He couldn't make it up here. So sorry about his absence this afternoon. The property is located in the Canton neighborhood of Baltimore City and is zoned R8, and sits at the northeast corner of Southeast Avenue and Fate Avenue. It contains the lot contains 1,125 square feet and is approved with a 2-story structure that covers the entire lot. Because the interior of the property contains only 2,250 square feet, it's exempt from the zoning code's bicycle parking regulations. A little bit about the property's background. The property known as 3200 Fate Avenue is at the corner of Southeast Ave and Fate Avenue. A Google Earth aerial and a street view photo showing the property. Prior to 1918, the city's easternmost boundary was East Avenue, and according to records from SDAT, the property was constructed in 1913, so thus it was built in Baltimore County and predates, obviously, the Baltimore City zoning regulations, the zoning code. But since 1931, per the police survey, I have a copy of the zoning card for the property, it has had a ground floor retail use, a grocery store. The last certificate of occupancy for the property was issued in 1975, which was to continue to house 2 families and a grocery store. Now, in 1999, I have a copy of the permit history from housing also on the exhibits. In 1999, permits were obtained to install electric for 2 apartments and 1 grocery store, as well as 3 separate HVAC systems. The applicant acquired the property in 2010, and by that time, the grocery store had already been converted to a use as an efficiency unit, and all 3 units now and since then have been leased at this time. I have a street view photo showing the property in 2009. Before my client purchased the property, showing it, the grocery store had already been converted to use as an efficiency unit. But because a UNO permit was not issued, does not appear to have been issued for the conversion of the retail use, the applicant now is seeking formal approval to use the former grocery store as a dwelling unit, as the efficiency unit term is no longer used in the current zoning code. In order to legally establish the 3rd dwelling unit, the lot area and parking variances are required. As the building was constructed prior to the enactment of the zoning code in Baltimore City, it covers the entire lot and there's no space to providing off-street parking. We met with the community association. There's a letter of support in your file. I can go through all the standards. I outlined them in the outline. That's part of the exhibits. The property is unique by virtue of the constraints imposed by the existing structure, which was constructed long before the establishment of a zoning code in Baltimore City. The property already has 3 separate HVAC systems and electrical systems, and there'd be an unnecessary hardship to remove the separate mechanical systems from the property. It's been there since 1999. There's been no negative impact to community or property values, and the letter of support from Canton confirms that. And the other factors are detailed more fully in the outline. To answer any other questions the board has.
These are 3 separate entrances?
Yes. Well, actually, a little bit. A copy of the floor, copy of the site plan.
Those 3 doors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Correct. It's the street view photo. Thank you, Mr. Fields. Yes, 3. Thank you. You asked a question.
It's got just over 1,100 square feet.
The lot, yes. The lot area is 1,125 square feet.
It's like half of the requirement.
Right, and as I discussed it with Mr. French before, obviously the new zoning code doesn't have the 25% cap on variances, and if it were under the old code with 25% cap, this would be considered an efficiency unit in the former grocery store space, so there would be a lower variance percentage requested.
It already had the 2 DUs before. It had that for some time. It had the retail use on the first floor. And at some point, the retail use went away and that became an efficiency unit.
Correct, and that was before my client acquired the property in 2010. And so now that all 3 units are fully leased, and so it'd be a hardship to remove the dwelling unit and the tenant from the space.
But he could use that first floor as a neighborhood commercial, though.
I guess it'd be an open question because it was originally constructed as a retail space, but if now it's been converted to a non-retail space, I don't know if it loses
I don't
its...
think that matters. I think it's about original construction.
And again, with the community supporting it, there's no ill effect to the community's development. The Canton neighborhood's thriving. Even though it's kind of suburban, as Mr. Cunningham points out sometimes.
It is, though the degree of the variance is, the code sort of, suggests intended uses of property given the lot size restrictions. And given the severity of the variance that would be necessary here, it sort of just raises the question as to whether or not there's a need for the third, whether or not it's envisioned under the code that there be 3 DUs at this location or that there be 2 DUs and you just use the first floor as a commercial space or whatever it is it's going to be used as. Do you understand that the elimination of the efficiency use has probably sort of created a little bit of havoc there, but all right.
This property is unique because of its history and predating the city of Baltimore's annexation of this part of the city.
I don't know if history quite is a uniqueness in and of itself.
Well, it's a unique standard for you to have a differentiation between this and other future applications where this property's been in place since before the city had
Sure, but every property that would be east of that boundary would have the same thing.
And if it had a prior established use that, while not a dwelling unit, was a grocery store and had a use that was active, it should be converted, and the community supports the conversion of it to a less intensive use. Retail is obviously has more day-to-day traffic. This is one person in the studio apartment.
All right, questions?
I'm good.
Great, thank you. All right, 2018-168, 28 East 25th Street, Corey Johnson.
Hi.
Afternoon, ma'am. You're Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Okay, and Ms. Johnson, we have this as an application to use a portion of the first floor as an educational facility. Is that correct?
Yes.
Ma'am, would you please raise your right hand to be sworn?
You swear or affirm hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Do we have staff reports?
Yes, Planning Department has reviewed this application, which was described as a commercial school providing education and training for various professions, and notes that this property is zoned C1, and in that particular district, educational facilities, commercial, vocational, are not listed as a permitted or conditional use, and so are not allowed. The last authorized use of the property was a multifamily dwelling, which is a permitted use, and there is no record at this time available to the Planning Department of any existing non-conforming use of the property, and particularly of the ground floor or first floor level of the property. The department recommends disapproval of the application because the proposed use is prohibited in the C1 zoning district where the property is located, and the zoning code does not authorize creation of new non-conforming uses, which the proposed commercial school would be at this location. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Ma'am, Ms. Johnson, why don't you describe or tell us about what you're planning on doing with this educational facility or school?
So I'm looking to open and operate a private career school, which under Maryland higher education is legal term is considered post-secondary school, where individuals will come in to learn. We're going to do phlebotomy, medical assistant, first aid, CPR. Individuals will come in for lecture. They'll study through PowerPoint presentations. They'll come to school for approximately about between 7 to 8 weeks, and then they'll go and do more hands-on at clinical facilities. Then they'll come back and take national examinations to be certified. I have brought pictures of the facility so you all can see, and also a letter from my neighbors upstairs and my landlord, if you would like to.
Sure. This is it. And what areas are you looking to conduct courses in?
Medical assistant, phlebotomy.
How would this be licensed, or would it be?
Yes, so I will be licensed under Maryland Educational Commission. So basically, I have to submit in my application for approval with them, where I will submit curriculum and everything that they have listed for me to submit. One other thing that's listed for me to submit with my application is occupant of permit of usage is why I'm here to go through this portion. But they have a whole criteria that I'm submitting through them also to make sure everything is licensed. And I'm also accredited with another licensure to certify individuals under.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And do you have any background in operating or either operating institutions of this type or any experience in administration with institutions like this?
Yes, well, I own and operate a nursing agency that I've had since 2015. My background, my bachelor's degree is in business. I am a certified phlebotomy instructor and also a line health instructor. I have taught classes at other colleges, but this will be my first time actually opening and operating on my own.
Ms. Johnson?
But I'm sorry.
That's all right. Are these types of courses that would sometimes be offered at places like community colleges?
Yes, correct. Yes, you're welcome.
Martin, what was the planning recommendation again?
Planning recommendation was for disapproval based on the characterization of the property as a commercial school in the original application. And commercial school is not listed among the permitted uses in a C1 zoning district.
According to the the licensure that I'm trying to get for as far as career school, the legal term is considered post-secondary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a bit of a anomaly, it looks like to me, looking at the definition in the code, that you look under educational facility, post-secondary, the general definition says that it means a post-secondary institution, so presumably after high school. Institution for higher learning such as university or college that grants associate, bachelor, master, or doctoral degrees. It includes post-secondary theological schools for training ministers, priests, rabbis, and other religious functionaries. Exclusions, it says educational facility post-secondary does not include a commercial or vocational educational facility. So then when you scratch your head and you say, okay, well, what is a educational facility, commercial, vocational? Under the general definition, it says educational facility, commercial, vocational means a post-secondary school. So now it goes on to describe it. It says a post-secondary school that teaches industrial, clerical, managerial, commercial, or artistic skills. But I can think of universities and colleges that grant associates, bachelor's, master's, and doctoral degrees that teach industrial, clerical, managerial, commercial, or artistic skills. So it's a bit of a tautology there. And I'm not sure that the difference that it's describing is really one that's intelligible. But we'll sort of take that up. Anything else?
No, that's it.
Okay.
Anything? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And 2018-124, 201 Wilson Street and 213 Wilson Street and Alley. I understand there's some opposition to this. Okay, so anyone who's in opposition, you can get on that side. And sir, if you want to use that microphone that's on the left, bend that way, and then folks, you'll use the microphone that's there on the right. Yes, yes. You can just bend that microphone around, share it there. There you go. All right. All right, you're Mr. Frederick?
Yes.
All right, and Mr. Frederick, we have this as an application to consolidate 201 and 213 Wilson Street and use as 11 dwelling units. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. Folks, would all those intending to give testimony in this case please raise their right hands to be sworn?
Do you swear or affirm the testimony that you're about to give in this hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right, do we have staff reports?
Yes. So in one instance, we have a letter of support from the Bolton Hill Community Association. It's signed by Ms. Linda Riddleman, the president of the association. But we also have an individual letter of opposition by Mr. Victor Sparrow. And then we also have another letter of opposition submitted by a Mr. Brad Furley and Miss Anita Wallia that includes signatures of 33 individuals that are assumed to be residents in the community.
The Planning Department reviewed this application, noted that this property is contained within both the Madison Park South Urban Renewal Plan area and the Bolton Hill Historic District. The Urban Renewal Plan does not prohibit or restrict the proposed use. The Historic District, of course, does impose requirements and limitations concerning the exterior of the property in question. The specific requirement is that any exterior changes, including additions, demolitions, and alterations, are subject to review and approval by the Commission for Historical and Architectural Preservation. The department considers this particular property of considerable importance in terms of its preservation as an historic site within Bolton Hill. The Department of Planning recommends approval of this application be subject to the condition that all exterior changes, including additions, demolitions, and alterations, are completed in accordance with an authorization to proceed issued by the Commission for Historical and Architectural Preservation. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Frederick, is that condition stated by the planning department acceptable to you?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. French, one more thing. Looking at our data sheet, I see that there's a reference that the appellant has applied for a parking exemption for historic structures from the Director of Planning. Is that
I
correct?
believe that's correct.
Do you know what the status of that is?
I'll let Mr. Frederick answer that.
That has been approved. And I do have a copy of the approval. If you would like a copy?
Sure.
Somewhere in here.
Okay. How many copies do you have?
Just the one. You can keep that.
Okay. Have you shown this to your opposition yet?
I believe they have seen it, and I'd be happy to share it with you.
Is this just for the church? Does it include the house next door?
That's for the
Sir,
whole property.
if you could step forward and state your name for the record first. We just need it so that we have a complete transcript.
My name is Victor Sparrow. I own a neighboring property.
Okay. And your question again, sir, was?
I wanted to know whether or not this exemption went to just the church, or does it go to the house next to it? There are two pieces of property.
Mm-hmm.
That's the parking exemption.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to look to see if there's anything in the exemption which answers your question.
Mr. Chairman, our contention is that it's one legal lot.
All right. Sir, why don't you go ahead and begin your presentation, and if I come across something I can identify.
I met with the residents opposing this appeal. We met outside before the hearing today, and I wanted to understand what their opposition was centered on. And it's centered on their belief that the property, there are three buildings on the property. There's the main church, there's a parsonage, and then there's a small building behind the parsonage. And I can show you this aerial photograph. You can see the church in the background. This big building here is the parsonage, and then this is the small building behind the parsonage. So we met out in the hallway to discuss the basis of their opposition, or what they're opposing. Their opposition is that they see the parsonage as a separate single-family house, and Bolton Hill has a long history of opposing any conversion of a single-family house into a multifamily dwelling. That's the basis of their opposition. If it were true that we were converting a single-family house into a multifamily dwelling, their opposition would have a lot of strength and a lot of history behind it and be very valid.
You said if it were true.
If it were true, yes, sir. So, the block plat, the city block plat, shows the church as being on lot 16, and shows the parsonage as being on a separate lot, lot 15. And the block plat shows an alley being drawn between those two parcels.
You have to
So you
blow up
see-
here.
yeah. So that's the block plat. That block plat was drawn in 1929. The way the city records are now, there's two tax bills, there's two lots.
Mhm.
So looking at the tax records, one would assume that it's two separate lots. However, when we bought the property in 2015, we purchased the building. We asked our title attorney, we said, can we get two separate deeds? Can we get, because we wanted to have the house on a separate lot, we wanted a separate deed for that house. The title attorney said, no, it is not possible. It is not a separate lot. It is not a separate legal lot. We asked for a separate deed, we could not get a separate deed. The legal description of the property, and this is taken directly from our deed is on public record. The legal description of the property is very simply 77 feet, 9 inches wide by 130 feet deep. It's a rectangle. There's no alley in between there. The location survey that we had done in 2015 when we purchased the property.
If I can interject for a moment. Just reading from the description that you've handed up, do you have a deed reference for this, like a liber and folio number? Just reading through, so you represented this as from the deed description.
Yes, sir. That is from the deed description.
Says, beginning for the first thereof at the corner formed by the intersection of the southeast side of Wilson Street and the southwest side of Park Avenue, and running thence southeasterly bounding on the southwest side of Park Avenue, 77 feet 6 inches, then southwesterly parallel with Wilson Street, so you come down, you come up, with Wilson Street 130 feet to Jenkins Alley, then northwesterly bounding on the northeast side of Jenkins Alley with the right use and privilege thereof in common with others, 77 feet 6 inches to Wilson Street, and then northeasterly bounding on the southwest side of Wilson Street, 130 feet to the place of beginning. So it does sound like there is a rectangle that's described, although.
One rectangle, not two.
Well, it says, then northwesterly bounding on the northeast side of Jenkins Alley.
Jenkins Alley
just a
is, I'm sorry, yes.
With the right use and privilege thereof in common with others,
That's the-
77 feet 6 inches to Wilson Street. And then northeasterly bounding on the southeast side of Wilson Street, 130 feet to the place of beginning. So if you look at your survey, we start off here, it says to beginning in the first at the corner formed at the intersection of the southeast side of Wilson Street. Oh, here we go, Wilson Street. Okay. Running thence southeasterly bounding on the southwest side of Park Avenue. All right. Then southwesterly parallel with Wilson Street, 130 feet to Jenkins Alley, which is the alley here in the back. That would skip over that 4-foot, what's described as a 4-foot alley.
Yes.
Northwesterly, 77 feet 6 inches along the northeast side of Jenkins Alley, with the right use and privilege thereof in common with the others, to Wilson Street, and then northeasterly bounding on the southeast side of Wilson Street, 130 feet to the place of beginning. So the description, looking at the survey, comparing it to the survey, runs in a rectangle. It includes that what appears on the survey as a 4-foot alley, which is not included in the block plat, it is not included in the property description.
7353.
So yes, it would appear from the description, it's one contiguous lot and includes the 4-foot alley.
Yeah.
In reference to the earlier question regarding whether the exemption applies to just the church or the parsonage, what's described as the property address is 201 Wilson Street. Then for the site plan description, it says, please attach a site plan drawing and photos to illustrate site limitations and providing parking and a brief explanation below. More details may be provided in the attachments. Looking at the materials appended to the application, it's specifically described that, I guess this is on page 4 of 6, that 201 and 213 Wilson Streets are erroneously described as two separate lots and two separate tax bills, and then providing the analysis that you discussed that the property is actually only one contiguous lot. And it's reflected as such in the site plan accompanying the permit. So 201 would be, I guess, the
church.
213 would be the separately described, well,
Parsonage.
would be the parsonage. Because they're all only one lot, the property address would be 201, which would include the parsonage.
Yes. The title reference for that deed is LIBOR 17353. 17353. Folio 308. It's the recorded deed.
Okay, and that's, of course, the Land Records of Baltimore City.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is a block plat. The date on that block plat is cut off, but obviously it was before the 1929 block plat that we currently refer to. And if you see at the top of that block plat is the Strawbridge Church property. It's all one lot. It does show the three buildings, the church, the parsonage, and the small building behind the parsonage. There's no alley on that drawing.
Correct. There's it looks to be a hash line that's sort of dotted across it, but there's no, doesn't look like there's an alley that's separately described.
My apologies for not having a better photograph printed, but this photograph shows the front of the building with the zoning sign on it. That's the parsonage house. If you look to the left of that, you'll see a red door.
Mm-hmm.
That red door is where the alley is according to the block plan.
Okay.
Where's the red door?
Right there.
I'm totally colorblind.
Right there.
Gotcha.
Okay? So it's not like
You can see.
you would commonly think of as an alley. Why that alley was drawn, nobody knows. We can't figure it
Looks
out.
like it's more like a breezeway or access way.
Yeah, there is a breezeway between the two buildings.
Mm-hmm.
That is there. So,
I'd note that I think the procedures for, well, just noting the existence of a door there, if that was an alley, there would have to be a permit to close the alley in order to have that door there.
yes, I'm aware of
Is
that, so
there
yes.
a lock that's on the door?
Yes, that door is locked.
And who has the key to it?
I do, we do.
Okay, so,
The owners do, yeah.
all right. So in order for a property owner to have done that, you need to have an alley closure permit. Is that correct, Mr.
If-
French?
If it was a city alley.
That's correct.
Okay, so we went to property location, we met with West Shaw and Dawn Flannery, and filed an application to consolidate the two lots. They started, so I sat at the desk with Dawn Flannery, we looked up all the prior deeds to see if there was ever two separate deeds. She said no. Her research, she researched it, she indicated it, West Shaw reviewed her research, they indicated that it's not two separate lots, it's always been one lot. So the purpose of our filing the lot consolidation is merely to correct the erroneous city records. West Shaw and Dawn Flannery, they determined that that alley drawn on the block plat is not a city alley, so there's no need for an alley closure permit or go through the city alley closure process. The application in West Shaw's office is being held up pending this hearing, because they sent it to zoning for zoning approval. Zoning said, we're not gonna approve this because there's a BMZ hearing on this property. We have to wait for BMZ to approve it before the zoning office will sign off on the lot consolidation. If we didn't have this hearing, we would just consolidate the lots, it would be approved, and it would be done. So I was trying to double track the process, and that's part of the reason why we're here.
Okay.
All right, now, furthermore, with regard to that alleyway.
Now, I've heard a lot of references to a parsonage.
Yes.
It's typically understood as like a residence for clergy, ministers, et cetera, that's associated with the church.
Yes.
Is there any sort of, what's the factual basis to the understanding that it's actually a parsonage, or is that just sort of language that's gotten attached to the structure without really any knowledge that it actually was used as a residence?
We were told by one of the neighbors, a woman that lives on this block, that the parsonage that was last used as a thrift store. That's what I've heard.
My name's
If you
Greg
could identify your name?
Greg Kamenetz, and I'm Greg, yes.
Greg Kamenetz, yes.
So, there are a number of documents at the Maryland Historic Society on this church, and I went down and reviewed them. There's a historian who put together a booklet on the history of the church that was presented, that was created around 1930, and it talks about the parsonage being used as a school through most of its period, most of its history.
All right. And Mr. Baumgartner, I believe you did unearth some information to that effect.
Washington, that's all hearsay. It's not,
That's fine.
Okay. So,
Just a moment, sir.
That's correct. When we researched the property address in the city's old mainframe system, which, yes, we still have here, the land use codes attached to what is being described as the parsonage only show it as a place of worship and a educational institution attached to a place of worship. The property address of the existing church space was linked to the land use code for a place of worship. There's references to residential use, but in terms of the actual codes in the system, it shows church and it shows educational something attached to a church.
Okay.
When was it last used as a church?
the building was closed in 2009. Is that sound about right? Our understanding is 2009 was when it was last used as a church. Okay. So any other questions from the board members about the lot and the lot consolidation? And then I'll proceed with our use of the property. Okay.
I think you can get into that.
Okay. We started the process 2 years ago with our involvement with the community. In August, we started communicating with members of the board, members of the zoning committee, members in the neighborhood. In September of 2017, we had a meeting at the church. We invited, there was a group of about 15 people. We met in the building, walked through the building, and we had a brainstorming session. And the brainstorming session was simply, we have this building, we want to restore it to some use. We identified the limitations in terms of the zoning and the parking, and we talked about all of these limitations on the issues. And we said, neighbors, community members, what sort of uses, what can we do? What can we do? What are some of the possibilities here? What would you support? What would you not support? And this is just an informal brainstorming session, but it was the beginning of our involvement with the community. At that brainstorming session, we talked about all of these different uses. And the ones on the left-hand column, so those are sorted by commercial uses, residential uses, is kind of how we classified them. On the left-hand column, we checked off the uses that the community felt like they could support. Not that they would, but that these would be within the realm of possibility if the parking was right, if the design was right, if the use was right, that this would be something that they would be open to possibly supporting.
Thank you.
So that's how we started the process in August and September. That meeting was held in September 2017. After that meeting, we went back to the drawing board and we started working with our architect on concept plans. We came up with a plan for 9 apartments, plus having about a 2,400 square foot community space that could be used for art studios, yoga studios, all kinds of, any type of commercial use. We met 4 times. We met with the zoning committee, the Bolton Hill Zoning Committee. We sat down with them and met with them 4 times, went over our plans. We went back, did some revisions, went back, did some revisions, went back a 3rd time, did some revisions. And at the community suggestion, they said, after we talked about the idea of having this 2,400 square foot community space, they said, why don't you just make it into 2 more apartments? So the final plan was 11 apartments. The zoning committee met on March 22nd, voted unanimously in support of conversion of this building into 11 apartments. March 22nd. April the 3rd, just 2 weeks later, we got on the agenda for the board. So the zoning committee, we went to the board first. The board said, go to the zoning committee. We went to the zoning committee, met with them 4 times. Zoning committee approved the uses of 11 apartments, referred us back to the board. We went to the board meeting on April the 3rd, and it was an agenda item on the board, but it wasn't really like fully advertised, I guess, so we had a meeting April the 3rd. There were approximately 50 community members and board members at that meeting on April the 3rd. We had a lengthy discussion. We talked about this building for about an hour, maybe a little longer, and had a lot of dialogue, a lot of back and forth. At that meeting, the board voted overwhelmingly in support of the project on April the 3rd. On April the 5th, we filed the zoning appeal for this hearing. We also filed for the parking exemption. So once we got the board go-ahead, we went ahead and started the city process. I didn't want to start this process, the zoning approval process, until we had community support. So we did that. Then, when we put the zoning sign up, the phone was ringing off the hook from the board president. So she called me up and said, can we delay the hearing? Can we do something to get more people involved in this process? We said, okay. So we went back to a second board meeting on May the 3rd. And it wasn't a full board meeting, it was a special meeting. We held the meeting in the church. We invited everybody in. We wanted them to come in and see what we were doing and kind of get a sense for the space and the architecture and the uniqueness of the space. That was on May the 3rd. On May the 3rd, there was a second vote, and it was a little bit closer, but the majority voted in favor and in support of conversion of this building into 11 apartments. Brad Feely is here in opposition to the program. He sent me a letter and said, can we meet with you? We said, okay. So we met with him in early June at his house. I went to his house. We met in his house for about 2 hours. There were 15 or 20 people there, and we talked about all the issues of parking, and we talked about the issues of lot consolidation and conversion of single-family houses and how important that is to the Bolton Hill Association. That was in the 1st of June. June the 5th, we went back to the board for a 3rd time, had another meeting, presented the project again, 11 apartments. Board voted in favor for a 3rd time. Actually, no, we did not have a 3rd vote. At that point, they just said, the board said, we're going to go with our prior votes. We're not going to change our prior votes, and thus we're here. So from the point of view of trying to preserve this building and try and renovate it and preserve it in a way that meets the dynamics of the building. So if you understand the structure of the building, they're like these roof trusses. And so dividing the apartments along the lines of those roof trusses makes sense in terms of trying to preserve as much of the history and architecture of this building as possible. Makes a lot of sense. In the sanctuary, taking the two side areas and making those two side areas into apartments and dividing the main sanctuary in half into two apartments, that makes sense. So we're trying to work with the structure. There are limitations there. These apartments are, I say all except for the parsonage house would be a 3-bedroom unit. The other apartments would be 1-bedroom units. And so with 1-bedroom units, we're trying to keep the density down as low as possible in terms of the number of people living in the building, in terms of the number of parking demand that it would have on the building, and also from students. I mean, if we turn this building into all 4-bedroom apartments, we could pack a whole lot of college students in there, and I don't think that would be beneficial for the neighborhood. So we're trying to keep it 1-bedroom apartments, keep them unique, big open spaces, something you wouldn't find in any other building in Baltimore, and to make it attractive and appealing in that way. And so we come to you today asking for a lot area variance of approximately 15% to create 11 dwelling units. And we feel like that's a superior proposal than having to come back to you every time we get a new tenant for the commercial space, asking for a variance from R7 zoning to some sort of commercial use from now till forever.
I think I've counted up these units. Just tell me if I got it right.
Yes, sir.
Right. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yes.
5, 6, 7, 8.
Yes.
9.
10. The parsonage is 2 dwelling units.
Yeah. So it's 9, and then this one hooks into here for 10.
Well, the parsonage, there would be a terrace level unit, and then the upper floors would be a unit in the parsonage house.
Yes.
And then the building behind the parsonage would be a separate unit. So that would be unit 11.
Okay.
So you have 8 in the church, 2 in the parsonage, and 1 in the back building.
Okay.
The reason for dividing up the parsonage into 2 units, if you made it 1 unit, it's going to be like art students.
Yeah.
If you had so many bedrooms in there.
Yeah.
And so by cutting it up into 2 separate units, 2 smaller units, it allows for, to appeal to a more professional tenant rather than students.
All right. Anything else right now?
That completes my presentation. Unless you have any questions, I'm happy to answer. I would ask Mr. Duff to speak in favor of our project. No.
Thank you very much. I'm Charlie Duff, and I'm chairman of the zoning committee of the Bolton Hill Neighborhood Association. Commissioner Fields, welcome. And Mr. Baumgartner, welcome. I've never had the pleasure of boring you. Your time will come. Just 2 points. Well, first of all, this building went vacant a long time ago, probably 2009 is a good date. And a lot of us in Bolton Hill spent a lot of time trying to figure out what somebody could do with it, and couldn't come up with anything. The building had massive and expensive structural problems, and at the same time it's a beautiful complex of buildings. We didn't want anything to happen to it. We couldn't figure out what to do with it. We had some pretty good minds working on that. And so when Ben Frederick and Greg Kamenetz bought this building, we were prejudiced in their favor. Actually, we thought, rots a rock. I mean, but everything that Ben said about the process is accurate. We're the zoning committee, and they met with us 4 times. One of the 4 times was out at the site. First time they met with us, we looked at the plans, and we couldn't understand them. One of us is an architect of 40-some years standing, and we still couldn't understand them because this is a complicated building. It's got windows up here and over there. So the second meeting was out at the site. Then it made a lot more sense. Third meeting, we reviewed the plans and sent them back to the drawing board. In the 4th meeting, they came in and we thought, okay, this makes sense. This is going to preserve these wonderful structures. It's going to make our neighborhood a better place. It's going to create good units. Good units on average give you good neighbors. So that's, sort of our basic orientation. I've heard some talk that the zoning committee is undemocratic, that there were only 4 of us there. The zoning committee is certainly undemocratic, and it's not set up to be democratic. It's set up to be an advisory group of people who have some kind of expertise in something. And the 4 of us included a couple of people who've rehabbed hundreds of houses, included an architect of 40-some years standing, a guy with a master's in city planning from Harvard, and and we made a recommendation to the board, and the board then did what it did. So we were flagrantly undemocratic, and so are you, for that matter. There are only 3 of you and 620,000 people in the city of Baltimore. So, and the final thing is, I think all sides of this, and there are 2 sides, the neighborhood has some divisions, all sides of this hope that you will understand that we, the people of Bolton Hill, are standing by one position that, as far as we know, we've had for as long as we've had an association. Our association is 95 years old this year, and it's changed an awful lot. One thing I think that has not changed is that consistently we have wanted to defend the stock of family houses in Bolton Hill. Bolton Hill has a lot of family houses. We have a higher percentage of families with children than the city average. We have a lot of people without children at home, and at the moment that includes me, although I could come back any day. So there's some talk that this thing called the parsonage is actually a house. And there's some talk that the Bolton Hill Community Association is turning its back on 95 years of history by saying, we think it's a great idea to turn a house into 2 apartments. We don't think that's the case. We don't want to abandon this very important position of ours, which we've held for almost a century. But the building described as the parsonage is not a house the way your house is a house or my house is a house. I live in Bolton Hill, and if I decided to move out of my house and turn my house into a thrift shop, I'd have to stand over here, and my neighbors would all be standing over there. They'd haul me before you. But when Strawbridge Church opened a thrift shop in the building referred to as a parsonage, you didn't know anything about it. Your ancestors didn't know anything about it. It wasn't a zoning issue. Why was it not a zoning issue? It was not a zoning issue because the building was not a house. The building was part of a church compound. The building was a church building. They could do what they wanted with it, and they did. Sometimes their minister lived in it. Sometimes their minister lived somewhere else. They had classes in it. They had a thrift shop in it. They could have stored the Easter pageant costumes in it. We don't know what they did with it. It was a church building. And this kind of thing happens in church buildings all over town. This one was no exception. So this building looks like a house, but it doesn't quack like a house or walk like a house. This is a part of a church complex. And so here we are, the Bolton Hill Neighborhood Association, and we will stand behind our old principle of defending family houses. And if we thought this was a house, had historically been a house, we might be over there. But we're over here because it's not a house, it's never been a house, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, you done? Okay.
Okay.
Ma'am?
Yeah, let me just talk a little bit. My name is Sarah Anderson. I'm a church neighbor. I live across the street, but on the block that the church is on Park Avenue. And I've been working with a group of neighbors since this came up, since there was the presentation at the Community Association meeting that Mr. Frederick referred to, and a group of us got together, and so we submitted really kind of a joint effort letter to you, and I'm really, to some extent, speaking, just so that somebody can speak on behalf of the group, and others might speak too who maybe know some of the history better than I do, but I just wanted to address the issue of support and then some of the variance issues that are at issue here, and they're linked, obviously, because the variance standard really, one of the issues that it turns on is impact on the community. And although there was the letter of support by the community association, we just want you to know that, initially there was this meeting with the community association that was really billed as an informative meeting. Like, let's talk about this, ideas. And then lo and behold, there's a vote of the board, which, of course, sets everything in motion. And then we met later at the church, but again, it wasn't a vote of community members. It was a vote of this small board group that did vote in favor of it. But in terms of and really very little representation of the people who live in the area of Bolton Hill that really are most impacted and that live, right around this church. And so the group of us got together, and there's really quite a sizable number of people. There's signatures, there's names on the letter that was submitted to you. We were rather under the wire in getting this letter out, and our apologies for getting it to you so late. But a number of people have sent emails. I think if we had time, even till Monday or something, I venture to say that there'd be quite a few more. That people are very concerned, about the impact of this. In terms of the 1 lot, 2 lot, honestly, that's above my pay grade, and the documents in the city. I don't have additional documents to give to you right now. As was talked about, there's the history of the parsonage and church being treated separately, but really, it's sort of a red herring anyway. It doesn't much matter whether they're 1 lot or 2 lots. The parsonage building was used early on as a parsonage. There are records that we do have and can provide. I think I have some that are really old handwritten documents, photocopies, but where they were used as a parsonage. The pastor's family lived in the parsonage, and obviously under the zoning code, as I read it, if a non-conforming use is abandoned, then it goes back to being a single-family house. And as I look at the language, it really doesn't matter if they're on 1 lot or 2 lot. It really is talking about the structure and the building, and this structure and building was originally a parsonage. It just was. They lived there.
Well, it can actually, if it's 1 lot, it becomes what really enters in the picture is primary uses versus accessory uses. And the structure appeared to be accessory to the church. That's something which is impossible if there's 1 lot. You might have been here earlier for a case where there were separate parcels and the property owner wanted to operate a business on one that really was going to be an accessory use to the uses that were going to be on the others, and they made the statement that you can't have an accessory use to something that's not on your property. It all has to be one thing. So that's really where the importance of 1 lot versus 2 lots comes in here, is that if it's 1 lot, and it appears from the legal description to be that way, and checking SDAT records appear to have it as 1 lot as well. If it's 1 lot, then the structure is an accessory structure, in which case the uses really can change. But from the evidence that we've heard from the city's files, it sounds like the city has it recorded as being an educational structure, like which you would use for a Sunday school, and those are in sort of the older records of the city. And the reason for my question earlier about it's being referred to as a parsonage, but is it an actual parsonage, or is it just, in my mind, a building is a building. People use it for different things, but it's a building. Now, if it's a residential building, is there someone who can testify the knowledge of it being used as a residence? From what I've heard, it's been used as a lot of things over the years. I haven't heard it being used as, at least I haven't definitively heard it being used as a residence, although Mr. Dopp certainly suggested that. But, like I said, looking at the city's files, it appears that it was, the city has it down as being used as I would believe to be either a seminary building or a Sunday school building. But in any event, if it's one lot, then it's accessory. The structure is an accessory use to the church, or is an accessory structure to the church.
It was, in terms of the old records, it was used in early years as a parsonage, so I can't speak to the date of the city records, if they were at a time when it was used. It certainly has been used for a number of different uses. But
well, I'm going to guess, just from looking at it, it's a very old structure. So it's probably, probably goes back maybe, or likely goes back past the city records, which goes back to, what, the 30s?
The building was built in 1880.
Yeah. So the oldest records that we have, at least the oldest indication that we have in the city files, at some point, it seems to be undated right now, but the only indication that we have from the city files is that it was used for educational purposes.
There's and we could submit, another neighbor had sent me an email running through because he went and did some research at the Historical Society and found a number of different pastors' families who lived there, and I don't have those documents to give you. If you'd like, we can certainly get them to you quickly. But it was used as a parsonage, and I would say too, we can't at this point go and look in the house to see, was it built as though it was built to be a house where people were living, because the applicant already started construction on it and, substantially gutted and did construction. So, there's sort of been spoliation in that regard. We can't really go in and see, what does this look like? Does it look like it was built to be a single-family house? But it appears to have been. And I'm going to let Mr. Furley address, because he might have more information than I have on that's what I was referring to, the handwritten document, and I do have an extra copy.
Yeah, it's Brad Furley. There is a deed specifically referring to it as a parsonage, and an indenture to keep it a parsonage from 1890. That's Liber 1274, folio 77, or 77 and 78. And it also references these lot dimensions. I believe the suggestion that the suggestion that the city somehow made this magical mistake that agrees with these early lot dimensions doesn't seem credible either. So I guess the suggestion is they're the same kind of, the Methodist Church always kind of owned both of them, actually did own both of them.
Mm-hmm.
So in their minds, what did it really matter? In a sense, they'd never really had to consolidate back at any point. So so there are records of...
What earlier deed reference do you have describing the property?
There's a deed, again, and from 1890, the initial, 1890, the initial reference to the parsonage lot as a separate deed.
Okay. So then what appears to have happened then is that that there must have been some consolidation such that, and this appears to have been done some time ago, but there must have been some earlier some consolidation of those lots to bring them, because they were both, as you said, both owned by the church, and the church merged them into one. Now, zoning didn't always exist. It only, I think, came about in the 30s. And at that point, or at some point after that, it was reflected as being used as an educational building.
Mm-hmm.
But the point is that the property now is all one parcel, it would appear, certainly from the property description. And the structure is an accessory structure to the church.
Right. Oh, I don't disagree. I don't disagree that it appears to be.
Yeah.
The question is, historically, if there was a mistake made along that path, not that it, again, materially matters, but it does seem that this was certainly a allotted single-family dwelling for the pastor of that church at the outset. Now, the subsequent uses.
Yeah, I mean, if I own, I mean, this comes down to, you know, this 4-foot alley or whatever. There doesn't appear to be a record of the city having ownership of that 4-foot strip. So, you know, if I own Lot A and I also own Lot B, and, you know, I put a driveway along the border so I can get to the back of Lot B, and then I say, you know what, this is silly. Why do I have two separate, why do I have this reflected as, you know, two properties, and I get tax bills, blah, blah, blah. So I consolidate it. It's really no functional difference. That is the boundary line of that property, because I own both halves of the boundary. So all I've just done is I've just simply taken an eraser to it and then made two things into one. But that doesn't really sort of have any sort of consequence, because there's no one who's on the other side. It's all mine. But as I said, the important thing is that what is the property now? It appears to be one lot. And as one lot, the structure, it's an accessory structure. We certainly don't have zoning evidence of it being used as a residence. You know, the property was, or the structures were built back in the 1860s or 1880s. And it may well have been that at that point, maybe it was used as a residence. But that appears to have changed at some point going forward, whether that was in the 50 or so years between construction and the first time the city started keeping records on it, and then eventually gets reflected as a educational building.
In terms of, well, so moving just from the parsonage to the church, and just looking at the density, you know, the bulk density, what they're essentially doing, what the applicant is essentially doing, is borrowing from the lot size, you know, the square footage of the parsonage lot to get the calculation to work out to be 11 units, which is a lot of units in that space. It's really a lot of units in that space in this neighborhood, and it's inextricably linked with the parking issue too. So under the zoning code, it doesn't seem like, even if they're one lot, that you can borrow from another structure to get the square footage to then, you know, make the church denser than it would otherwise be. If you just took the church by itself, I think it ends up to be about 7.7. If you take them together, it came out to 11, which is why there's the 3 units in the parsonage, and the 9, which is a lot in the church. And our position is that that variance just isn't justified. I mean, you know, you can talk about that the church is a unique structure, it's got angles, it's, you know, it's sitting there as a church, it's been empty and all that sort of thing, but, you know, but the variance rules aren't, my understanding is they're really looking at whether there's something unique about this structure that requires a variance, and it really doesn't. I mean, there are the trusses, but that doesn't mean that it needs to be 11 units. I mean, you could, you know, make it half that, or, you know, make the trusses work out and not have quite that many. And while we recognize that the variance has been granted for parking, the more units that there are, the more it really does affect the neighborhood. And if you drove around our neighborhood at night, you would see that on that corner, those spaces are taken up at night. They are already taken up at night. And I recognize, you know, the neighbors in Bolton Hill recognize that they're in a city. But, you know, it's one thing to buy a house, say in Federal Hill, and you know that, you know, if you're a family with a baby, you may be walking 4 blocks with your baby and groceries in the rain, and you know that. Bolton Hill, for the most part, you know, you can get relatively close, and people there's a lot of families in the neighborhood, and parking really is tight. So even though the variance was granted, it really is, the issue as far as the negative impact on the community is really inextricably linked with the parking too. And in addition to our position just being that, you know, the bias in the neighborhood has been toward single-family, owner-occupied houses, people who are going to care about the neighborhood, people who are going to be part of the neighborhood, and that's really part of the property value. It's part of the value of the neighborhood. And, you know, so to have this many rental units, which I don't care if you call them luxury, you could go look in the church. These are really relatively small units, which, you know, some of which I think don't have windows or partial windows on the first floor. You know, they're narrow slices and vertical because the building is tall. And, you know, looking at the conversion standards in the code, they don't seem to really address, that I could find, you know, this kind of structure. It's really looking at houses that, you know, were single family and they're being converted to multifamily. And, you know, so we've got a structure that really could be really very much in keeping with Bolton Hill townhomes, even though, as you can see from the pictures, in a very different looking structure. You know, there's really nothing about the structure that justifies this many units and a rather significant variance. If the church were considered by itself in square footage, I think, what did you think the variance was, 17%? If the church were, you know, considered by itself, you know, even 15% is a significant variance in this situation. So, so we just wanted to come and let you know the neighborhood impact, let you know that even though the board voted on this, there's a very substantial number of neighbors who really went into this process thinking we were just going in for an informative event, and all of a sudden there's votes that really got the ball rolling, and you know, the nearby neighbors really do feel affected, both by having just high density rental property, you know, right there, whereas we really, you know, try to avoid that, and having the parking issue. So that's what we wanted to share with you today. I don't know if any of my neighbors, go ahead, Mr. Sparrow.
Yeah. I would like to be heard on the issue of the density question. Parking really is a problem in our neighborhood. I have own a home adjacent to the property, and I would urge, there is a significant difference between 9 and 11, and I would think that if the board were to consider this, that they impose some sort of duty on the developer to look at the issue of parking, to see if there's some alternative parking available in the area if the board's inclined to grant the variance to go from 9 to 11 units. I mean, I think 9 is an awful lot, but if it's going to go to 11, then the developer should be required at least to make some effort to go to find alternative parking for the people who will be living in those units. And that's basically my point. When I asked the developer during one of the meetings about the question of parking, the developer said, in no uncertain terms, made no effort to find alternative means of parking when there are lots of neighborhood facilities which you could get which would be available for parking. And that's my point.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This thing was a church. The Sunday school was actually in the church building. I've lived there for 16 years, not in the annex that is being discussed. So for the record, that's where they would set up their band and hold Sunday school, was in the main church. I live the closest to it. I live at 1618 Park Avenue. The back corner of my courtyard is 45 feet from the back corner of where their property is on Jenkins Alley. And if I wanted to convert my house into 3 apartments, rent it out, and move down to Fells Point, which to me sounds like a great idea at some point when my wife and I are ready to retire, the rules of the neighborhood would prevent me from being able to do that. So I won't be back here in front of you guys to ask for that. And I would just say, to use Mr. Duff's analogy, if it walks like a duck, talks like a duck, looks like a duck, it's a duck. That's a big space. It's a church. It's not 11 units. And the unique element of that 2-block area is up at the top of the hill on 1700 block of Park, you have the old Friends School, which has been converted into apartments. Directly across Park Avenue from the church, you have a yellow building that's 4 stories tall that is, I don't know, there's probably 19 apartments? 19 apartments that are in there. And down the block, on the 1500 block of Park Avenue, you have the Beethoven apartments, which comes with parking, but not everybody that lives in a Beethoven parks there. So that 2-block area of Bolton Hill uniquely has higher population density than any other 2 blocks in the neighborhood. And if we convert one more facility into another 11 apartments, all of a sudden you've got a situation that is just, it's an overkill, and that's my point. Thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So when was the last time the building was utilized as a church?
Oh, I'm gonna say it was probably, they were always doing something in there, but 6-7 years ago would be my guess.
And okay, where did those people park who used the building as a church or church building?
There weren't many of them. The one, but this is a good point, right? There is a church, Baltimore church school on the 1700 block of Park Avenue, and on Tuesday nights when they hold their big class sessions, it's almost impossible. People go down to North Avenue to park. It is so there's no squawk in the neighborhood about that because it's one night a week, but that's an overkill situation also.
I ask because I live in the city and I live next to a church, and there are some days where you have to fight for parking, and there are other days where you have no neighbors at all. And I'm just wondering about the correlation between the number of parishioners or whomever else you might have going into the church or using the building in a commercial kind of way. The number of people that would be there versus 11 units in the same neighborhood, what would the difference really be?
If it was during the day and you came to our block, you'd have no problem finding a parking space. You come to our block at 7:30, 8 o'clock at night, or 11 o'clock. We have an overnight nurse. We have a daughter who's disabled, and when the nurse comes at 11 o'clock, for her to have to walk 3 blocks is just not right.
I understand that distinction.
Anyone else?
Thank you.
There's only one more thing I'd like to say. Density in the neighborhood is about to increase materially because there's a new high-rise going up at the corner of Meacham and Utah, and that will definitely increase the parking problem in the neighborhood. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
May I just,
Mr. Frederick?
one other issue, please? All right. I just want to say I really appreciate these people coming out. It just shows their devotion and dedication to the community process. If I may address one other point about this alley, quote unquote. This, by the way, is, again, an aerial photograph of the building. This white garage here, by the way, is this gentleman who's complaining about parking. That's his parking garage right behind his house. But you can see this building, this little one-story building behind the parsonage. That building goes all the way back and connects to the church. So if that was an alley, that building is built over the alley. That building was built, I'm told, in 1908. To recap the meetings that we had with the community, April 3rd, we went to the community meeting. There were over 50 people in that room. At the end of the meeting, they took a vote. I don't know what the actual roll call was. What I saw was, I saw a lot of hands raised in favor. There was one man who was opposed to this project out of 50 people. Then we got the backlash from the neighbors. We had this second meeting with the community on May the 3rd. That meeting was held in the church, and we had more than 50 people there. And parking was a big discussion. 80 people at that meeting. Parking was a big discussion. And as the gentleman said, we were asked, would we be able to do anything about parking? Is there anything we can do about parking? And so, at first I was like, no, I mean, the site is the site. It's full of buildings. There's no place to put parking. I'm like, what do you want me to do? Parking has been a problem in Bolton Hill before we got there. Parking is going to be a problem after whatever happens to this church, parking is going to continue to be a problem in the building. But we went back and met with our development team, and we said, okay, what can we do? Is there anything we can do? And we came up with a parking mitigation plan. Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry. So, in our parking mitigation plan, which we presented to the community at the meeting at Brad's house on May 22nd, and we also presented it at the third board meeting on June the 5th. One, we're committed to building parking, bicycle parking in the basement of the building. We'll have a very nice, attractive, secure parking facility in the basement for bicycles. We also identified 12 off-street parking spaces or parking garage spaces that we can secure for our tenants if they want to rent a parking space in the neighborhood. Those 12 parking spaces are within 2 blocks of the building. So again, from a process point of view, I'm doing everything you guys are asking me to do in terms of meeting with the community, trying to address their issues as best as I can within the limits and constraints of the property and our ability. And I thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. So what is this that you've hinted up here?
Yes. So again, first we committed to bicycle parking. The reason why we commit to bicycle parking is because today something like 75% of the people have a driver's license age 16 to 44. That means 25% of the people don't even have a driver's license. A lot of the young people today, they don't want cars, particularly in a neighborhood like Bolton Hill where you can walk to Penn Station, you can walk to the subway, you can walk to the light rail, and you get reasonably good bus service, and you're close to employment. So people don't need cars as much as they did years ago. And again, the young people, their mindset is, I don't want a car if I can avoid it. That's the mindset there. So in addition to that, we also identified 12 parking spaces at properties that we either we can control, or we have some control or some relationship with the owner of those buildings, where we can secure those parking spaces and then offer them to our tenants if our tenants want to use those off-street spaces.
Okay, so this is something that you're prepared to do then?
Yes.
Okay. And it says here that you've got 12 possible parking spaces, but I see 1, 2, 1, and then 4. That's a total of 8.
I'm sorry.
We have contacted the owner at 1600 Park Avenue about renting the 4 garages behind that building.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Now, you says that you've contacted them about renting them. What's the status of that?
So they're in a process of ending the leases with the tenants that are using that building for storage now. And once they get out of that lease legally, then they're prepared to talk to me. And, we've talked about, I told them I'm interested in renting the garages. They said, we're interested in renting the garage to you, but we have to clean up this other mess first. And then, so that's an ongoing discussion. This is all within a very short period of time, of course.
Okay. And then these other 8, are these ones that you're actually able to offer as of now?
Yeah, those are units that we either own, manage, or have a very close relationship with the owners of those.
Okay.
Those are the Bolton Street addresses, right?
Yes.
And does that displace, what do the residents at those locations use then for parking?
Some of those garages are used, some of those parking spaces are used, some of them are not. Some of the garages are used for storage and not for vehicles. So I'm just saying that you know, we're trying to have some movement, we're trying to show good faith.
Sure.
And not that we're gonna solve the problem, but, you know, we're interested in working with the community.
Any other questions?
I'm good.
All right. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Take care. All right. I think we are off the record.
Excuse me.
Okay, which ones do we want to talk about? We're going to start off with Wilson Street.
Sure, as fresh as one.
Kind of odd to pass up the parking mitigation at the end, particularly when they already had a waiver. It's just, you know, but okay, if you're going to offer it. So, I mean, yeah.
Maybe because it's not particularly firm.
Yeah. Oh, it sounded like he's prepared to offer 8. He doesn't know about the other 4. So I was going to say, you know, what if we do a condition of having, you know, maintaining at least those 8 spaces? Yeah, it just seems kind of silly. Again, it's like, but you have the waiver, so what's...
It's not necessary or required.
Yes, well, but he said that, yeah, we're willing to do this. So it's like, okay, well, if you're willing to do it, then all right, fine. Yeah, everything else, you know, as far as, you know, I was trying to look at the dimensions of the units, to, you know, sort of work through the whole variance framework. It's a pretty simple format here, particularly, you know, the use of this last one there in the back, you know, and then, yeah. So that was a bit creative. You know, it's a large, obviously, I mean, it's a large lot, and it's certainly the fact that they are, you're really talking about merging the accessory structure with the primary structure, which in doing that now enlarges the footprint, but then you've got, you know, he's right, that you wind up with this 3-story building that you now have to kind of cut up. It seems to me that the most efficient way to do that is probably the way that they're doing it, which is you put 2 in one and then you use the other one in the back. So that made sense to me. Because I was like, well, you know, you're talking about 9, you might move up to 11, but, you know, when you look at it, you know, you're not, you know, I don't really see how you would do it alternatively unless, you know, maybe you made these you know, you probably make these dividing lines a little bit larger and you absorb basically 2 units out of this and you put it back at 9. But I think that would probably, I mean, they've got limitations imposed by the structure of the building because they have to operate under CHAP. They're not, so they have to retain the windows and the exterior architecture and that kind of stuff. So you can't put in new windows.
I'm good with the proposal as is.
Yeah, and so it's just like, it just seems like it's shoehorned in enough where I think that I can see why they need the variance for those extra 2. So.
I think it's advantage to have parking available.
Yeah.
Certainly makes units more
attractive, yeah.
But I don't know that I would require it. I mean, you know, if you guys want to do it, I can go with you, but.
My thought was, I mean, until he passed it up, I was fine with, you know, parking, and then he says.
Kicking himself for that, yeah.
Well, you're ahead. But then, you know, you put it up and you say, oh, well, you know, this is what I'm willing to do when I've got, you know, I either own or I manage these properties and I can offer these.
Looks like there's some control.
Oh, there.
I'd love to know how many cars are getting kicked out, though.
That's the one thing that's given me hesitancy on that, is it's, you're borrowing basically you're borrowing from here to put over there, but then it's like, all right, well, now you're just creating a problem there. So that, I'm fine with, actually, it's got to waive if parking's not in it. Because that's the one thing that I am concerned about, is just, you wind up, I don't want to have row houses that are apartments or other residential buildings that now are going to have no parking when the parking waiver was only actually granted as this address.
Can you even consider a condition of parking since it wasn't before the board anyway?
Yeah, if they put it up, yeah, because they offered it. It's just what she said. It's just.
Since it was waived,
Yeah, well, that's the reason why my mindset was, okay, yeah, parking's not it. I wasn't even thinking about parking anymore. And then he says, oh yeah, I'm prepared to do this. And so it's like, all right, well, is this upon something that we can put in there? Is there a reason to? But, my hesitancy on that is just what I said, that I don't want to borrow a solution for this property and create another one, for other places.
Yes, I think that's what would be done.
Yeah. All right.
I mean, the truth is that you have a vacant building, or you have a building that's in use. Bolton Hill's the type of neighborhood where, I always look back to Enter Gardens when I moved in.
Mhm.
And people, the stadium was there.
Yeah.
You got a stadium, you got cars.
Mm-hmm.
That's, it's the way this neighborhood is.
All right. Fate.
So we good with that?
I'm good with what's it called, Wilson Street.
So am I.
My only question really was about whether we wanted to hold his feet to the fire on the conditioning on parking, but I'm fine with letting that go. Fate is a little bit more of a head scratcher. That's the one, it's got a history of being 2 DUs with a commercial use in the basement.
The ground floor.
Well, the ground floor, rather. And now they want to make the first floor a residential unit. And they need a variance of about 50% on lot size. And my thought on that is that the code is very new, and we went through to sort of identify what the necessary or what the required square footage would be for dwelling units in this district. And here, it was determined to be 2250 in order to have 3 units. I think it's 750 square footage per dwelling unit, which is, it's not palatial. But the idea is that it's moving towards a little bit larger of a footprint, really to squeeze out what had been a lot of these, efficiency type uses, because the code is wiped out. It no longer recognizes efficiencies. And it's an effort to increase the quality of the housing stock. So here you got this property that had an efficiency, and they're like, well, how about, I still want the efficiency even though I'm not allowed to have it anymore. So what if I just say that that's a dwelling unit now, and I just get a variance as a way of really end running around the elimination of that efficiency unit. If it was a smaller variance, that might be one thing, but it's a 50% variance. And overall, when you're talking about variances with row house units, it's pretty hard to get to the uniqueness part, because it's a rectangular grid. They all look that way. Looking back at Wilson Street, yes, you can see why that. It's a larger lot. It's a historic structure, et cetera, et cetera. Its uniqueness is a lot more easily understood in that context than it is with a row house. Now, there are smaller variances